In the gloomy corridors of the royal palace in Madrid for 2 decades from 1840 to 1860, whispers circulated about the secret meetings of Queen Isabella II of Spain. Behind the golden doors of her chambers, the most influential woman on the Iberian Peninsula immersed herself in amorous adventures that shocked even those accustomed to aristocratic liberties. For more than 20 years, Isabella turned the Spanish court into an arena of romantic intrigues involving generals, opera singers, royal guards, and ambitious courtiers. These scandals spread throughout Europe and ultimately played a role in her downfall from the throne. She was not just a queen with several secret lovers, but a woman who made adultery a public spectacle, spending entire fortunes from the treasury on romantic whims, while her kingdom plunged into political and economic crisis. But how did a girl crowned at the age of 3 during a time of national hope become the main character in scandals that could make even the most promiscuous French blush? How did the Queen's chambers become the stage for an endless series of favorites who fought for power through her bed? To understand this unprecedented moral decline, we need to look into the most intimate secrets of the Spanish court and find out how absolute power can turn an innocent child into a figure who will forever undermine the prestige of the Spanish monarchy. Isabella II was born on October 10, 1830, the daughter of King Ferdinand VII and his 4th wife, Maria Cristina, of Bourbon to Habsburg. Her birth was a disappointment to the Spanish court, which had hoped for a male heir to ensure the stability of the dynasty. Ferdinand, who had married 4 times in the hope of having a son, saw his daughter as only a partial solution to his succession problems. As a child, Isabella found herself at the center of brutal political intrigues that shaped her personality and predetermined the tragic events of her adult life. When Ferdinand VII died in 1833, Isabella was only 3 years old and was proclaimed queen under the regency of her mother, Maria Cristina. This decision was the catalyst for the First Carlist War, a bloody conflict that divided Spain for 7 years between supporters of Isabella and those who backed her uncle Carlos, who claimed the throne. In an atmosphere of constant paranoia, surrounded by armed guards and courtiers who fought fiercely for her attention, Isabella grew up believing that she was the center of the Spanish universe and that everyone in the kingdom should be willing to sacrifice themselves for her. This upbringing created a narcissistic and hedonistic personality that never learned the concepts of boundaries, responsibility, or consequences. Moreover, from an early age, Isabella was exposed to conversations and situations with sexual undertones. The courtiers, many of whom were ambitious and immoral men, often discussed intimate topics in the presence of the young queen, believing her to be too young to understand. This early exposure to adult sexuality, combined with a lack of moral education, sowed the seeds of an obsession that would dominate her life. In 1543, at the age of 13, Isabella was declared of age and officially took the reins of Spain. This political decision, made to end the turbulent regency of Maria Cristina, placed an emotionally unstable teenager at the head of one of Europe's most significant countries. The young queen, physically mature for her age but emotionally immature, suddenly realized that she had absolute power over millions of people. The first signs of impending problems emerged during negotiations for her marriage. Isabella displayed alarming sexual maturity and an interest in men much older than herself. At the age of 14, she was already openly flirting with generals and ministers, shocking even the most debauched courtiers. When European diplomats discussed possible suitors for the young queen, their conversations were less about political considerations and more about attempts to control the Spanish monarch's clearly insatiable sexual appetite. Imagine how, in the middle of the 19th century, a real scandal broke out in Spain that shook the whole of Europe. At the center of the events was Queen Isabella, whose life was full of intrigue and passion. In the 18th century, when Isabella was only a 16-year-old girl, her fate was sealed. She was to marry her cousin, Francisco de Assis, Duke of Cadiz. But this marriage turned out to be a real disaster, both personally and politically. Francisco was a weak and insecure man, and rumors of his possible unconventional orientation quickly spread throughout the court. According to the ladies of the court, the wedding night turned into a complete fiasco. Francisco, frightened by Isabella's strong personality, and perhaps by the very idea of intimacy with a woman, was unable to fulfill his marital duties. Isabella, already aware of her sexuality and fueled by frank conversations in royal circles, experienced deep disappointment and humiliation. This traumatic event was the impetus for her further scandalous escapades. Shortly after the wedding, Isabella began to seek solace elsewhere. Her first documented affair was with a young officer of the Royal Guard, José María González, better known as Pepe Alcanis. This affair, which began in 1847, set the tone for her future romances. Isabella preferred men of lower social status, showering them with privileges and titles, but she soon grew tired of them and replaced them with new favorites. Alcanis, the son of an army sergeant, was not only attractive, but also possessed a masculinity that contrasted sharply with her husband's effeminacy. Isabella quickly promoted him through the ranks, granting him privileges that caused a real shock in royal circles. She generously showered Alcanis with gifts, giving him jewels and even real estate, worth enough to support an entire city. But even more shocking was that Isabella made no attempt to hide her relationship. Alcanis appeared alongside the queen at official events, accompanied her on trips, and had access to her private chambers at any time of the day or night. This behavior caused a storm of indignation among foreign diplomats, who sent detailed reports of the scandals at the Spanish court to their capitals. The relationship with Alcanis lasted about 3 years, during which time Isabella became pregnant twice. The children born of this relationship were officially attributed to King Francisco, but no one could deny the obvious. The first child, born in 1550, clearly differed from both parents, inheriting features that identified him as Alcanis's son. When Isabella grew tired of Alcanis, her decision to get rid of him was as abrupt as his rise to power. The former favorite was sent to remote military service and soon expelled from the country, receiving a generous pension in exchange for his silence about his relationship with the queen. Such cruel treatment of her lovers became a constant feature of Isabella's character. Her next favorite was an even more scandalous character, Carlos Marfori, an Italian actor and opera singer who appeared in Madrid in 1851. Marfori was not only handsome, but also possessed a magnificent voice, which instantly attracted the queen's attention. However, his marriage and children did not bother Isabella, and she easily stole her husband from another woman. Her obsession with Marfori reached such proportions that she attended all his performances, often occupying the royal box alone and applauding so loudly that it caused embarrassment to the entire court nobility. After the performances, Marfori would immediately go to the queen's chambers, where he would stay until morning. These nightly visits were known to everyone in the palace, including the unfortunate Francisco, who was forced to endure public humiliation. During her relationship with Marfori, Isabella spent huge sums from the state treasury on productions specially created to showcase her lover's talent. She even built a private theater in the palace, hired the best musicians in Europe, and imported luxurious sets from Italy. All this happened at a time when Spain was facing serious economic difficulties, and the people were suffering from high taxes and food shortages. How could the queen spend money so carelessly when her subjects were in need? Imagine the passions that flared up in the Spanish royal court, where intrigue intertwined with romantic affairs. This is the story of Queen Isabella, whose relationship with the singer Marfori was full of jealousy and scandals that could not go unnoticed. Isabella developed a real obsession with Marfori, forbidding him to communicate with other women and demanding that he spend all his free time with her. When she found out that he was corresponding with his wife in Italy, it caused a real storm. Imagine how a scene that shocked everyone present broke out in a hall full of courtiers. Over the 5 years that Marfori was the center of the Queen's attention, he amassed a fortune thanks to the generous gifts and lucrative contracts that Isabella arranged for him. She even granted him the title of Marquis of Lochi and extensive lands in Andalusia. This caused discontent among the traditional nobility, who could not accept that an actor, an outsider, was rising above those who had served the crown for centuries. But, as is often the case in Isabella's life, her interest in Marfori faded suddenly and cruelly. In 1556, she simply ordered him to leave Madrid. Marforio, accustomed to luxury and power, tried to resist, but quickly realized that Isabella could be as ruthless as she was generous. He was escorted out of the country by royal guards and forbidden to return to Spain under threat of imprisonment. The next stage in Isabella's love life proved even more scandalous and dangerous for politics. In 1557, she began a relationship with General Enrique Puigmoltó, a charismatic military man who had made a name for himself in the colonial wars in Africa. Puigmoltó was not just another lover. He had serious political ambitions and saw his relationship with the Queen as an opportunity to gain real power in Spain. This relationship marked a new milestone in the moral decline of the Spanish court. The general did not seek only personal privileges. He began to interfere in military appointments, promoting his supporters and removing those who stood in the way of his plans. This led to instability in the Spanish army and caused several minor military uprisings. But that was not all. Puigmoltó began to encourage Isabella to expand her love affairs. He introduced her to other men, organizing meetings attended not only by the two of them, but also by other military officers. These intimate gatherings, held in the royal palace, turned the official residence into a place where political deals were made through sexual favors. Imagine how carefully these events were prepared. Special rooms were decorated with Oriental furniture. Participants dressed in luxurious costumes, and musicians created a festive atmosphere. All these extravaganzas were paid for out of the state treasury, while soldiers on the front lines suffered from a lack of equipment and officials went months without pay. Rumors of such events spread quickly, even among the clergy, which only exacerbated the scandal in deeply Catholic Spain. Although these rumors were never confirmed, they caused particular outrage in a country where the church was traditionally considered a moral compass. At this time, Isabella became pregnant several times and gave birth to children whose paternity raised many questions. The fantasy that Francisco was the father of these children became so absurd that official documents began to be drafted with vague wording, avoiding direct statements about kinship. The line of succession in Spain became a subject of speculation, as no one knew which of the children actually had royal blood. At the same time, Isabella's behavior became increasingly eccentric. She began to abuse alcohol and suffered from emotional instability. Her mood fluctuated from deep melancholy to manic euphoria, which greatly affected her ability to govern the country effectively. Ministers complained about the difficulty of getting consistent decisions from the Queen, who often changed her mind from one day to the next. All these love scandals, extravagant spending, and neglect of her duties created an atmosphere in the royal palace that shocked foreign guests. Imagine a real scandal erupting in the heart of Spain, in the royal palace. Ambassadors from different countries sent alarming reports about what was happening at the Spanish court. Situations that resembled a brothel more than the residence of a Christian queen became commonplace. These rumors quickly spread throughout the European courts, and Spain's prestige plummeted. The situation is exacerbated when Queen Isabella begins to choose her lovers from among officers, courtiers, and even commoners. Imagine how shocking this is to the aristocracy. Suddenly, simple guards of the crown are given titles, and ordinary merchants occupy important government posts. Artists who were previously unknown become influential advisors thanks to their intimate relationships with the queen. This new order, based on sexual favors, creates an artificial aristocracy that completely ignores merit and tradition. Families who have served the crown for centuries find themselves overshadowed by the new rich, whose only value is to please the queen. This reversal of traditional values causes deep discontent among the old aristocracy and undermines their support for the regime. The royal residence turns into an unofficial brothel where favorites receive titles and wealth just to please Isabella. Many young men compete for her attention, creating complex intrigues where everyone tries to undermine each other to maintain or win the queen's favor. This network of favorites becomes known throughout Spain thanks to servants who sell information to scandalous newspapers. These publications, secretly circulated in Madrid and other major cities, contain shocking details of the queen's love affairs, causing outrage in conservative society. The Catholic Church, which traditionally supported the monarchy, found itself in a difficult position, trying to defend a queen whose behavior contradicted all Christian moral norms. At this time, Isabella also becomes fascinated with exotic luxuries, ordering Oriental furniture and hiring foreign consultants to create fantastic interiors in her chambers. These passions require enormous expenditures on decorations, costumes, and perfumes brought from the farthest corners of the world. Isabella spends more time organizing intimate meetings and lavish celebrations than governing the country. Ministers wait several days for an audience, while the queen is too busy with her love affairs to care about state affairs. This neglect of her duties leads to political and economic crises that seriously undermine Spain's position in Europe. Isabella's physical condition also begins to cause concern. Constant alcohol consumption, excessive sexual activity, and emotional stress from constant scandals take their toll on her health. She develops tremors. Her skin becomes pale and wrinkled, and her voice takes on a hoarse tone, reflecting years of excess. Court physicians note her deteriorating health and growing emotional instability. By the mid-19th century, Isabella's reputation has become so toxic that Spanish politicians begin to secretly discuss the possibility of her overthrow. Respected generals refuse to serve under a queen who has become a symbol of moral decay. Foreign diplomats avoided official visits to Madrid so as not to be associated with her scandalous regime. Even traditional allies of the monarchy began to openly question the necessity of her rule. The scandals become so loud that they cause public outrage in Madrid and the provinces, often reflected in satirical newspapers and street protests. The Spanish people, who had always respected royal authority, began to openly express their contempt for the queen, who seemed more concerned with her own pleasures than with the problems of her subjects. The situation reached a critical point during the Revolution of 1860, when a coalition of military leaders, politicians, and ordinary citizens rose up against Isabella. Imagine how a queen who once wielded all the power and luxury suddenly found herself at the bottom of public contempt. This is the story of Isabella II, Queen of Spain, whose reign became a symbol of moral decay and political disaster. The uprising that shook the country was triggered not only by complex political and economic reasons, but also by deep moral outrage caused by the queen's behavior. Pamphlets of the time portrayed Isabella as a woman who had not only betrayed herself, but also humiliated the dignity of the entire nation. It all began with a military uprising in Cadiz, led by Admiral Juan Bautista Topete. This event quickly spread throughout Spain as military units and civilian masses united in the struggle for change. the revolutionaries' loud cry of "death to shame" became a symbol of their struggle, directly referring to the scandals that had become an integral part of the Queen's image. When news of the uprising reached Madrid, Isabella attempted to resist, relying on her favorites as military advisors. But alas, these men, chosen for their romantic qualities, proved completely unprepared to deal with military and political crises. Their clumsy attempts to organize the defense of the capital only hastened the fall of the regime. September 1868 was a fateful month for the Queen. When it became clear that her position had become untenable, Isabella was forced to abdicate the throne and flee into exile in France. Her departure was accompanied by humiliation. The inhabitants of the cities through which she passed shouted insults and expressed their contempt. The woman who had once been crowned with hopes for a better future for her country left Spain hated by almost all her subjects. Her exile in Paris was financed by the treasures accumulated during her reign, including jewels and works of art, which she had used for her extravagances. In Paris, Isabella continued to live in luxury, but now without the support of the Spanish treasury. During her exile, she made several attempts to return to power, but her efforts were thwarted not only by political opposition, but also by the moral revulsion she inspired. Even traditional monarchists who theoretically supported the idea of monarchy refused to work for the restoration of a queen whose reputation had become synonymous with scandal. Freed from her presence, Spain entered a period of political experimentation. The country experienced a constitutional monarchy with an imported king, a short-lived republic, and ultimately the restoration of the monarchy under Isabella's son, Alfonso Guantañón. However, the damage done to the reputation of the Spanish monarchy by Isabella's reign proved to be long-lasting and contributed to the political instability that continued in the country for the next 50 years. Isabella died in exile in Paris in 1904, a forgotten and despised woman who had destroyed one of Europe's oldest monarchies because of her inability to control her amorous appetites and preserve her royal dignity. Her death was barely mentioned in the Spanish press, and even her own children showed little grief over the loss of a mother who had brought shame not only on her family, but on the entire country. Isabella II's legacy became one of the most striking examples of how personal corruption can destroy entire political institutions. Her transformation from an innocent girl into a symbol of scandal shows how absolute power, combined with a lack of moral education and responsibility, can lead to the emergence of leaders who cause irreparable damage not only to themselves, but also to society as a whole. Isabella's story also highlights the particular vulnerability of absolute monarchies to the excesses of individual rulers. Unlike democratic systems, where incompetent leaders can be removed through legal procedures, absolute monarchies often lack the mechanisms to deal with rulers who become completely unsuitable for their duties. Moreover, Isabella's scandals affected hundreds of people who were drawn into her excesses against their will. The men who were elevated to pedestals and then discarded at her whim, the families destroyed by her arbitrary decisions, and the subjects impoverished by her extravagant spending represent the real human cost of the absence of moral and legal constraints on absolute power. Today, more than 150 years after her fall, Isabella II remains a cautionary symbol of how moral decay in the highest echelons of power can lead to catastrophic consequences for an entire nation. Imagine how, in our modern world, where questions of morality and political responsibility are at the forefront, history can still teach us important lessons. Think of how leaders in different eras have faced similar challenges. Consider, for example, the scandal surrounding U.S. President Richard Nixon in 1974. This case became a true symbol of political responsibility and led to the resignation of Richard Nixon, who seemed unassailable. At a time when society began to question the acceptable limits of public figures' behavior, Nixon found himself at the center of a storm. His actions to cover up the truth became the subject of debate and controversy. This event not only changed the political landscape of the United States, but also made people around the world think about how important it is for leaders to be honest and open. Or consider how, in the 19th century, during the reign of Queen Victoria, social norms and moral standards became crucial aspects of political life. The Queen herself set the tone, and her personal life, including her relationship with her husband, influenced perceptions of power. This shows how the personal qualities of leaders can influence public opinion and trust in them. Thus, history continues to be relevant, reminding us that the responsibility and moral standards of leaders are not just abstract concepts, but real factors that shape our society. Every new scandal or crisis, whether in the past or present, highlights the importance of these issues. And perhaps that is why we continue to study and discuss these events, so as not to repeat the mistakes of the past.